Hey guys, Shane here. So welcome to part 2 of Lafayette Pool's M4A1 76. So in this part we're going to be weathering and painting up our model to get the result you just seen. So first things first, the model has been primed in Vallejo Surface Primer Grey, and I want to lay down a pre-shade, which is often used in aircraft modelling. However, it can be applied in armour and in figure painting. So I'm going to take some German Grey. I'm going to avoid using a flat black, it's just too stark and too jarring. And I'm just going to paint it into any recessed areas, any panel lines, and underneath the stowage, and any place I feel where shadow will be formed. And you can be as quite messy with this if you wish, it's totally up to you. So now moving on to the turret, I'm going to start working on the direct vision cupola, as well as the split hatches and some of the other turret fittings like the radio pots and what have you. Now what's going to happen is when we come to paint the actual camouflage in olive drab colours on this vehicle, we're going to lose a lot of our pre-shade. My needle on my airbrush is a 0.3, it's a bit too big for fine spray work, and my brush control when it comes to airbrushing isn't that good. So if you have better brush control and a finer needle, you will pretty much keep a lot of your pre-shade, or as much as you want. I'm going to lose quite a bit of it. However, it's always good practice just to lay it. It's better to have it and not need it than the vice versa. It's just an extra way of ensuring you get a little bit more depth in an otherwise very solid or monotoned vehicle. You'll also note that every now and then I'll pinch the needle of my airbrush, and that's just to take away any dried paint that's forming up on the needle tip. So with Vallejo paints, it does happen, especially too if it's a slightly warm day, you will get paint drying on the needle tip. Now I'm not using any flow improver, which Vallejo does make. I'm just using standard paint thinner for this, and I believe with flow improver the paint is less inclined to dry as fast on the needle. However, it is unavoidable, most paints will dry on the needle. It's just the nature of paint, it's being exposed to air, so it will dry. However, it's not hard to fix, you just keep pinching your needle, or some people take a toothbrush with a small amount of airbrush cleaner and give it a quick scrub. Either way works fine. Just working on the buggies, and again exactly the same, just going to spray it into areas I think it needs a bit of shadow, and just how much of this is going to be kept is really down to how heavy we put our paint layers on after this. Also, which I haven't filmed, is I'm also going to use the same colour to prime the tracks. I'm going to just prime them solid German grey and work up from there. Didn't really film doing the tracks because I hate doing tracks, so I just wanted to get them done as quick as possible. And also this video is not really designed to be a tutorial, it's more just a build log for entertainment more than anything else. Now it's time to start laying down some of the camouflage. So for this I'm just going to use again German Grey, exactly the same colour that we used for our pre-shade. So it does make it a bit confusing and a bit messy. However, both colours are fine, and the German Grey works very well for this type of black-grey camouflage patterns that some US tanks did, and Lafayette Pool in the 3rd Armoured Division were no exception. However, you could also use NATO black, I've seen used as well, and it works pretty well for this colour as well. So I'm just going to very roughly block it out to where I think it should go. Often there's no upper view on instructions, so you don't actually know where these lines go once they cross the vehicle, which really annoys me, but again, we can survive. I'm also going to spray these areas really wide, and there's a reason for that when we come to mask this, and I'll explain it in a few minutes. I start painting up the camo for the turret. Now you can make life easier and just actually temporarily attach the turret to the hull to make sure the lines match up. However, I just did it by eye, but I kept the hull very nearby, right beneath it, so I could keep visually referencing where the lines should join, and it worked okay. I didn't get any lines that didn't match up. So I'm going to paint up the gun barrel, and what I'm doing is I'm twisting the barrel in my fingers as I paint it up, and that just stops any of the paint from pooling. It is a bit of a problem sometimes you can get with like a round surface. So now I'm going to start masking off our camo, and for that we're just going to use blue tack. White tack works fine too. You can also use things like silly putty or Panzer putty, but they're much more expensive than blue tack, and blue tack works very fine for this job. However, I've left this paint to dry for 24 hours. You really need to let especially if you're using Vallejo paints, let them dry fully, or you will end up lifting the paint with the mask if you're not careful. Now, I've sprayed these camo areas like I mentioned very wide, and I'm not going to fill the entire area with blue tack, and that's to ensure that there's going to be no gaps when I come to spray the olive drab, should I say. I don't want any of the grey areas showing through, so to ensure that, I actually make the camo patterns a little bit smaller than the actual areas I pre-sprayed in the Panzer Grey. I'm also just taking time to make sure that I sit the blue tack down. I don't want any leaks or any seepage, so I'm just going to make sure I push it down without damaging any of the details such as the brush guards for the headlights and what have you. So now we're going to lay down our olive drab, and we're going to use Model Air US Dark Green. It is a little bit lighter than the actual olive drab used at the time. However, once you weather it back, it actually looks pretty convincing. I tend to do my olive drab slightly lighter than it actually was, and that's just done out of aesthetic for me. I don't like making my models too dark, because then you can't see any of the detail. So if you're a big stickler on paint, and I know a lot of people do put a lot of time and energy into researching the correct shades of paint, so perhaps this method might not be exactly for you, but my thing, if it's close enough to it and embodies the spirit of it, then it's close enough for me. It has to look good as well as be accurate. Like that's my criteria. So I'm just going to lay this down in a pretty even coat, and I'm going to lose almost all of my pre-shade because just my spray arc is so big with such a large needle. It's just the way it is. If you bear brush control, you can keep a lot more of the pre-shade in areas. So it's up to you. It will show through a little bit, as in it will make the preceding or the green area over the darker areas a bit darker because it's on a darker surface. However, you could have more of it showing through if you thin down your paints. I went a little bit gun-ho on this. I'm going to do so on the turret. Again, it's a little bit dark here for that, I'm sorry. I think my head wasn't the way of the light. And exactly the same, but spraying it down. Being careful not to pool the paint in any areas. I really do not want to get any leak or paint bleeding in through the mask. It just makes it a life pain in the arse having to come back and paint in any overspray. And we were going to have to do that anyway, but if you just take a bit of time, you can minimise the level of cleanup work you have to do. Again, it's working here on the gun barrel, on the 76mm gun. The interesting thing with this gun barrel was when we come to fit it into the model, which I haven't filmed, you will notice that, or more so you will notice if you come around building this kit, I could not get the gun barrel into the gun mantlet. There's like a key built into it, and I just could not get the fit, so I had to cut it off and just glue the gun just into like the gun mantlet without the key or the locator peg. It's not a problem with the type of 76 gun I was putting in because there's no muzzle brake, so I don't have to line up the brake. Now just painting up our buggies, which is not the most interesting thing in the world. Because there's so much green on my palette, or on my spray guard, it's actually darkening the light balance of the camera, so that's why until I change it out it's going to be a little bit dark. But again, they're only buggies, you've seen them all before. So now I'm going to mask off the area where there's going to be some bare steel from the recoil of the gun, and that's going to take my favourite colour from Vallejo, which is just Model Air Steel. I'm going to airbrush that down, being careful not to get any overspray onto the rest of the gun. So now I'm going to try a little bit of oil filtering, and I don't think I did this particularly right. I know Evan, or Panzermeister's got a video coming up on this subject, and I've already seen the work he's done with it, so it looks deadly. So mine didn't quite go that way. So normally what I do is I'll do my modulation with paint, but me being the genius that I am, I removed the masks. So I got curiosity got the better of me. I was like, I want to see my camouflage. So I removed the mask and then realised, oh shit, I haven't highlighted the green. So I'm going to try to do this now with oils. And it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. It's something kind of new to me. So I just took some lamp black and some titanium white and made like a slate grey colour out of it. I just painted onto the grey areas and just blend it back. What I found worked better was at first I was trying to blend it back with a brush moistened in white spirit. However, I found if I just dried off the brush entirely and didn't have it damp and just blend it back as a paint, it worked much better. This step did add a little bit of depth to the model. It did, to be fair to it. Not as good as I would have liked. And then I also found that if you kind of dry brushed it on and then blended it, it worked much better. So again, it's always good to experiment with different techniques and colours. And it's the only way we learn, and like all of us, I'm learning as well. So kind of always like trying new things in my builds. However, I did have to spend a lot of time taking out brush strokes. I don't think I did it quite right. I'd have to ask some of the lads about it and see what they say. Try to blend it back. See, you can see here I have my brush dampened and making it behave like a wash, and I really didn't want to. So I shouldn't have dampened the brush in white spirit and just blended it back manually. It just meant I had to go back and kind of take out the brush marks and blend it out better. It just created a little bit more work for myself. However, it's not a big deal, we're model makers, we're meant to be kind of patient. So having to do an extra few minutes of work shouldn't really make us lose our minds. Also, if you're curious about Lafayette Pool, check out the description of this video, and I have a very simple bio on the man in the description. It's easier for it to be read than me to talk about it, because I'll go off down a rabbit hole. Which I'm thinking I might do some podcasts or video casts that are more going to be like rambly, just like for conversation and stuff. So that might be something we might do in the near future. But just on this video, I kind of want to keep it concise. So now I'm going to add some filtering for the actual olive drab areas, and for that we're just going to use some yellow ochre. And you can kind of see that it changes the hue, it makes it a bit more warmer. And I'm just applying it on a big brush again. And again, I made the same mistake. I applied it with some white spirit as kind of a thinner, which I really shouldn't have done. But you'll actually see during this how I begin to evolve, so I stop using the white spirit and just apply it as a paint. And then if it's too strong, then I'll dampen my brush in a bit of white spirit and blend it back. You can do either. Oil paints are a very, very forgiving substance. So all you do is once you seal the model, now I didn't seal this in gloss. I will do for the other oil layers that we're going to put on after this. However, if I did gloss coat it, it might have made it like a little bit easier because the surface tension of the model would have been broken, so it would have flowed far easier, especially too because there's a cast texture on this upper hull. But then again, I just went for it. And I kind of had to learn on the job, but no problems. We can kind of make it up as we go, and if we don't like it, we can just attack it with a little bit of white spirit. Not too much, because again, the paint isn't protected, but even like a brush moistened in white spirit, and we can blend it right back to the point it almost disappears. And that's exactly what we want. We want this to be very subtle. So with our oil filters allowed to dry for 24 hours, now I'm going to seal it with some gloss varnish. So I will always gloss varnish each layer of oils I do, just to prevent them from being reactivated. It also protects the paint, and once we start putting down decals, for every layer of oil we put over it in gloss varnish, it'll also help the decals firstly sit and adhere to the model, and then it'll help take away any of the carrier film. So I'm just using Vallejo gloss varnish here. It's one of my favourite varnishes. You don't need to flood the model in varnish, or you'll have a hard time knocking back the varnish when we come to finish this model. So just a little bit. And then before we start laying any more layers of oil, we're going to lay down our decals, which for Pool's vehicle is very simple. So I just laid down the decals with a bit of microsol. I didn't film it because this big decal here was a little bit tricky, so I needed to kind of cut it up and reshape it, and then several layers over 2 or 3 days of microsol. And I'm just applying a bit more gloss, just with a paintbrush, over the areas that we laid our decals over, or decals, or however the hell you want to say them. And that's going to protect them. It's also going to help hide any of the carrier film, especially when we put our matte coat over this. So I do use a lot of sealant on my models. However, I find I get my best results from doing that. So it does add more steps. It does drag out a build by a couple of extra days, having to wait 24 hours for it to dry. However, it's well worth the wait, at least in my opinion. So with our layer is totally dry, now we're going to start applying our dot filter. I just took 3 colours here. I think it was titanium white, yellow ochre, and sap green, I believe. I just dotted a small amount, just focusing on the upper reaches of the vehicle. I just used a moistened brush with some white spirit to get these little streaks. I just worked it back. It's a very simple technique. I do have full videos on how I do this already, so I'll link that in the description of this video, if you guys are curious. Also, how to paint and weather a model is on its way, and this technique features heavily in that. It's coming next Sunday, so keep your eyes out for that, and it'll explain that technique in better detail. So I'm going to do this entire step on the entire model, both on the turret and the hull. And once it's been allowed to dry, I'm going to give it another gloss coat, just to protect it. And it also starts making the decals blend better with the model, and also the dot filter makes them blend better as well, makes them look like they're painted. I often get questions on the handle for the model. It's just an old airbrush cleaner jar from Vallejo, and just like a small bottle of gloss, and I just blue tack it and super glue it onto the models, and they're very simple handles and they do the job just fine. And then to stop the cleaner brush from falling over, I just put into a jam jar. So now I'm going to start adding some panel washes and pin washes, and for that we're using 502 Octilong Shadow Brown. It's my favourite colour from them, and I just watered it down, or should I say tinned it down with some white spirit or artist grade white spirit and made a wash. And I'm preparing all the areas for this wash with by moistening it first with white spirit. I don't want to drown the model in it, but just to prepare the surface. It just helps things flow a bit better. And I'm going to hit every panel line, any area that's raised, just to add shadow and definition and just help break up the various details. Anytime I see a rivet head, any type of recess, I'll touch in the wash. And I'll just basically touch the edge and let the capillary action do the rest. Some more panel lines and pin washing on the hull. This step does take a long time. It took me a good about 3 hours to do this. However, the effect really is worth every second of the time. It really does make the details pop. It also gives a sense of griminess to a tank. I think often we over chip tanks, however we under grime them. Tanks are more grimy than they are chipped, especially when they're maintained. And these vehicles, bear in mind, they went through 3 in not 7 weeks, I think it was like 17 or 14 weeks. So they're not going to be worn until they're knocked out. So it's going to be more grimy than like chip to hell, you know. Again, it's up to yourself. If you enjoy chipping your models, by all means, like, you know, there's aesthetic quality as well as accuracy here. And it's really down to what camp you belong to, really. with our pin washing done, I'm just going to take some Citadel Agrax Earthshade, which is an acrylic wash, and I'm going to apply it to the stowage on the back. Now, I didn't influence myself painting it, just the footage was too dark and unusable, and I just used different drabs and a few greys and grey blues. I'm just going to apply this all over the model. I'm going to keep it as even as I can, just add a bit of depth, and then what I'll do is I'll just do a simple stage highlight of using the base colour again. I'm not going to really bother filming any of this. If you guys watch any of my tutorials for figure painting, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just gives it a little bit of interest, as well as making it look flat. Like, I don't want this to look flat, it'll become an eyesore otherwise. Also, the wooden handle for the pick was picked out in Iraqi sand from Model Colour, and I'll put a wash of Agrax over that too, and I'll give us a wood effect. So I'm going to start adding a dust layer with our airbrush. I'm going to use Iraqi sand from Vallejo again. I've tinned it quite heavily, and I'm only putting a small amount of paint through my airbrush here. It's actually one of my favourite steps of a model. One, I know that the model is near completion, and two, it really does bring like a sense of life and a very pleasing effect to the eye to the model. So I really enjoy doing this part. So I'm really going to focus heavily on the under part of the tank. I think you just slowly build it up. Don't try to do it in one pass. It'll just look too heavy and unconvincing. So do a little bit at a time. I find works best. Put a small amount of dust on the transmission cover, and then on the edges of the tank. Also give the turret a small amount. I don't go too crazy on the turret, but just a little hint of dust. And then the same for the buggies. And I'll just wipe away any of the Iraqi sand that gets onto the rubber of the tyres, because they will be rubbed clean. So I'm not really going for a very heavily weathered appearance. We'll be doing much more heavily like mudded up Shermans in the future, but for this I just wanted to keep it simple. I quite like the way it was going and the way it's going to look, so I'm quite happy with that. Also with our dry sprockets, I've also just taken before this point some steel and a sponge and made a kind of exposed the spare steel on the teeth, just to show the paint being worn back by friction. And once that's dry, our last sealant layer, I swear to God, is matte varnish. And this is going to knock back all the shine, and with that our model will be complete. I'm using Vallejo matte varnish. It can be very hit and miss. It's a resin based acrylic matte, and sometimes it'll spit like dried pieces of resin that will flake on the model, and it kind of happened here, but I saw them and picked them off before they dried. So perhaps a better matte varnish would be applicable if you can get your hands on it. I just use what I have, and I don't mind Vallejo, so I'm kind of comfortable with it. I'm just going to ensure all the various components of the model get a nice coat of matte. I don't want to drown the model, but just a little bit. And with that dry, our model is complete. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Also, if you want to partake in the community and hang out together, I have a community page set up on Google+, so I'll link to that in the description of this video. I've been Shane. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video, and happy modelling. Bye bye.